I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditation of each and every one of our hearts here today will please God, who is our rock and our Redeemer. I've always had a little trouble with the line in the Lord's Prayer that says, "Lead us not into temptation." Why would God ever lead us into temptation? Does that sound to you like a very likely thing for God to do? It seems out of character, in keeping with the rest of His character. It seems out of character for God to lead us into temptation. Why would Jesus teach us to pray that God not lead us into temptation, unless there was a chance that He would? This is so strange to think about, and yet we pray it each week. This is exactly what Jesus taught us to pray. We are to ask God not to lead us not into temptation. Why? What does Jesus mean when He says it? Why would God do that? What are we really asking? These are some of the questions I want to talk with you about today as we continue our study on the Lord's Prayer. The first thing that we need to make absolutely clear is that your inclination to say that God would not lead us into temptation is absolutely correct. God does not tempt us. James makes this abundantly clear in James 1, verse 13 and following, when he says, "When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me.' For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does He tempt anyone." James goes on to explain where temptation comes from. Each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. James says that God does not tempt anyone. Temptation comes from our own sinful desires. We want something that isn't ours, or that we shouldn't have, and we act upon that desire. We take it, and then we have to deal with the fallout and the consequences. We are often to blame for tempting ourselves. We allow ourselves to go places we know we shouldn't go, or to see things that we know we shouldn't see, or to listen to things that we know we shouldn't listen to, and then we do things we know we shouldn't do, or say things that we shouldn't say. We tempt ourselves, and we fall because we enter into temptation. We also know that Satan and his demons love to tempt people. They love to see people fall. They have been tempting people since the very beginning. We tempt ourselves. Demons and Satan, the powers of hell, tempt us. But God does not tempt us. He cannot be tempted, nor does He tempt anyone. God has nothing to do with temptation. So then we ask, why does Jesus teach us to pray? Lead us not into temptation. I think that the answer lies partially in the translation of the word temptation. Many modern translations, like the New American Standard, the New English Translation, the NIV, the New King James, and the RSV, translate this, "Lead us not into temptation." But there are a few out there that translate this word differently. The New Living Translation says, "Do not let us yield to temptation." The New International Reader's Version translates this, "Keep us from falling into sin when we are tempted." Both of these have taken a little bit of liberty in adding the word yield or submit or fall. So they've actually added something that wasn't in the original text in an attempt to help clarify exactly what it is that Jesus meant when He said this. They're struggling the same way that we are, and they're translating it to help us understand it. This is only one possible interpretation of what Jesus is meaning when He says this. This could have been exactly what Jesus meant when he said, lead us not into temptation. He meant, keep us from falling into sin. Do not let us yield to temptation. He could have meant this, but this is not exactly what it says. So these translations have amplified what Jesus said. I think actually your Pew Bible gets this closest and does best in translating this. Your Pew Bible is a New Revised Standard Version, and when it translates it, it says it this way: do not bring us into a time of trial. Lead us not into trials, is kind of how it would say. The words time of are simply added to clarify trial because it would sound kind of strange. Lead us not into trial. It's kind of a weird way of saying it. So, and it's not plural, so lead us not into trials would be an addition as well. So they say, lead us not into the time of trial, or lead us not into a trial. Lead us not into a test, is another way of saying that. Trials and tests are challenging times in our life. There's a difference, though, between a temptation and a trial or a test. The Greek word here could be translated either temptation, or it could be translated trial or test. The difference, though, is significant, even though this word could mean either. A temptation is something that is designed to make you fail. It's something with the goal of making us sin and fall. It's a trap. It's a trick. It's a trick question designed to trip us up. Do you know how many animals Moses took with him onto the ark? Right? It's a trick. Moses didn't take any animals onto the ark. It was Noah that built the ark. Right? It's a trick. A temptation is something designed to trick you. It's designed to make you fail. A trial or a test, on the other hand, is neutral or maybe even positive in its aim. It's designed to evaluate the true condition of something. A test can determine somebody's knowledge of a subject. Many students in school don't appreciate tests, but tests are designed to evaluate the knowledge of a person on a subject. Or a test can determine the strength of an object, or to see how well something works. A trial is to establish the innocence or guilt of a party in a matter. A test or a trial is a neutral or a positive event designed to evaluate something or someone. A temptation, on the other hand, is a trap. God's tests in our life are periods of difficulty that God uses to see what we are made of, to examine our character. God uses trials and tests to prove our integrity and our character. When we pass these tests, God says, well done, good and faithful servant. And He gives us more responsibility. He trusts us more. He puts more things in under our care, under our leadership. James, again, in chapter 1, earlier in the chapter, verse 2, says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials or tests of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. God uses trials to test us, to prove us, and to promote us to greater responsibilities in His kingdom. So, if trials or tests are useful, and if the word temptation would be better translated as trial or test, why does Jesus teach us to pray that God would not bring us into them? Shouldn't we be more like David in Psalm 26 when he says to God, test me, O Lord, and try me. Examine my heart and mind. Why not pray with the psalmist? Why not pray with David? Bring it on, God. Bring on the trials. Bring on the tests. Prove it. See what I'm made of. Well, some of you are smiling Because already in your mind you're thinking, that guy up in the pulpit is crazy. He's a loony. Trials hurt, right? They're painful. They're difficult. They're challenging. They're periods of difficulty in our life. They may be useful and serve an excellent purpose, but they are tough. By the very nature of them, they must be, or else they don't test us in any way. That may be one reason that Jesus says to pray this way, but there may be another reason as well. We could fail it. We could lose. We could fail the test. A test comes to prove something about us. It may be intended to prove or exhibit our integrity, but in fact, in the end, it may show a lack of integrity. Though a test is not designed to cause us to fail, we may indeed fail regardless. It's one thing to say in the midst of a trial or a test that you're in, say, God, thank you for testing me. I'm here. I know that this is a test, and give me strength to come up to. It's one thing to say, God, I'm here. It's another thing to say, God, take me there. Jesus says, pray that God won't need to test you. Pray that you live each day with such integrity that there's no special challenge needed to find out whether or not you're a person of integrity. Pray that you'll be on your knees daily so that God won't need a crisis to bring you to your knees. This word, temptation, or trial, or test, seems to me to be best translated as trial or test. And we needn't ask God to bring them on, because when God knows the time is right, He will. So Jesus teaches us to pray that God will not lead us needlessly into times of trials or testing. But there's a second and reciprocal request, or part to this request. He says, lead us not into trials, but deliver us from evil. Lead us not to trials, but deliver us from evil. Now, evil, you have to realize, is not just, it's far more than just an abstract sense of immorality. Evil, in the Jewish mind, is anything that is hurtful or painful, anything that harms people, anything that causes pain. Evil is something that hurts. Joshua 23:15 says this. It shows this physical sense of evil as opposed to the spiritual or moral sense of evil. Joshua says, Joshua says, but just as all good things from the Lord your God, all the good things that the Lord your God promised concerning you have been fulfilled for you, so the Lord will bring upon you all the evil things until He has destroyed you from off this good land that the Lord has given you. God is not capable of moral evil. He is not capable of committing something that is morally evil. So in this passage, what Joshua is saying is that God will bring evil in the sense of physical harm to the people. He will bring destruction to the people. And this is not an evil in the sense of morality. This is an evil in the sense of it's something that hurts. Physical pain, hardship, suffering, even death. Deuteronomy 31, we see both of the kinds of evil in one verse. Deuteronomy 31, we see both the moral and the physical sense in which evil is used. It's a sort of play on words. Moses is speaking to the Israelites, and he says, because you do what is evil in the moral sense, in the sight of the Lord, in days to come, evil in the physical sense will befall you. Because you do what is morally evil, God will bring what is physically evil upon you. Because you do that which is wrong, God will bring things that hurt upon you. Because you do things that are bad, you will suffer the consequences of your bad behavior, which is physical. So when we pray, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, what we're praying is, don't let these times of trials come upon us. In fact, deliver us from them when we are in them.